Chapter 13. How Candide was forced to leave the fair Cunegonde and the old woman. After hearing the old woman's story, the fair Cunegonde treated her with all the respect due to a person of her rank and merit. Accepting her proposal, she asked all the passengers one after another to relate their adventures. She and Candide admitted that the old woman was right. "It's a great pity," said Candide, "that the wise Pangloss was hanged, contrary to custom, in an auto da fe. He would have told us admirable things about the physical and moral evils that cover the earth and the sea, and I would have felt strong enough to venture a few respectful objections." As each passenger told his story, the ship continued to advance. They landed at Buenos Aires. Cunegonde, Captain Candide, and the old woman called on the governor, Don Fernando de Ibarra y Figueroa y Mascarenes y Lampurdos y Souza. This great lord had the pride befitting a man who bore so many names. He spoke to people with the noblest disdain. He carried his nose so high, raised his voice so mercilessly, adopted such an imposing tone, and affected such a haughty bearing, that everyone who greeted him was tempted to hit him. He had a furious lust for women. Cunegonde seemed to him the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. The first thing he did was to ask if she was the captain's wife. Candide was alarmed by the way he asked this question. He did not dare say she was his wife, because in fact she was not. He did not dare say she was his sister, because she was not that either, and although this little white lie was once quite fashionable among the ancients, and can still be useful to the moderns, his soul was too pure to betray the truth. "Lady Cunegonde," he said, "will soon do me the honor of becoming my wife, and we beg your excellency to be so kind as to celebrate our wedding." Don Fernando de Ibarra y Figueroa y Mascarenes y Lampurdos y Souza stroked his mustache, smiled malevolently, and ordered Captain Candide to go off and inspect his troops. Candide obeyed, and the governor remained with Lady Cunegonde. He declared his passion to her, and vowed he would marry her the next day, in the church or otherwise, however it might please her charms. Cunegonde asked for a quarter of an hour in which to collect her thoughts, consult the old woman, and make up her mind. The old woman said to her, "Madam, you see, you have 72 generations of nobility, but not one penny. You now have a chance to become the wife of a man who's the greatest lord in South America, and has a very handsome mustache. Are you in any position to pride yourself on your unshakable fidelity? You've been raped by the Bulgars, and a Jew and an inquisitor have enjoyed your favors. Misfortune gives us certain rights. I confess that if I were in your place, I'd have no qualms about marrying the governor and making Captain Candide's fortune." While the old woman was speaking, with all the prudence that comes with age and experience, a little ship was seen entering the harbor. On board it were a magistrate and a number of police officers. Here is what happened. The old woman had been quite right in suspecting that it was a conventual Franciscan who had stolen Cunegonde's money and jewels in the town of Badajoz, when she and Candide were fleeing together. The monk tried to sell some of the precious stones to a jeweler. The merchant recognized them as belonging to the Grand Inquisitor. Before being hanged, the Franciscan confessed to having stolen them. He described the people he had robbed and the direction in which they were headed. It was already known that Cunegonde and Candide had fled. They were traced to Cadiz. A ship was sent in pursuit of them without delay. This ship was now in the harbor of Buenos Aires. The rumor spread that the magistrate was going to come ashore, and that he and his men were pursuing the murderers of the Grand Inquisitor. The prudent old woman instantly saw what had to be done. "You can't flee," she said to Cunegonde, "and you have nothing to fear. You're not the one who killed the Inquisitor. Besides, the governor loves you and won't let anyone mistreat you. Stay here." She then hurried to Candide and said to him, "Flee, or within an hour you'll be burned." There was not one moment to lose. But how could he part from Cunegonde, and where could he take refuge? Chapter 14. How Candide and Cacambo were received by the Jesuits of Paraguay. Candide had brought with him from Cadiz a valet of a type often found on the coasts of Spain and in the colonies. He was a quarter Spanish, born of a half-Indian father in the Tucuman province of Argentina. He had been a choir boy, a sexton, a sailor, a monk, a commercial agent, a soldier, and a servant. His name was Cacambo, and he loved his master because his master was a very good man. He quickly saddled the two Andalusian horses and said, "Come, sir, let's follow the old woman's advice. Let's ride away without looking back." Candide shed tears. "Oh, my dear, oh, my darling Cunegonde," he said, "must I leave you just when the governor is about to celebrate our wedding? I've brought you so far from home, Cunegonde. What will become of you now?" "She'll become whatever she can," said Cacambo. "Women always manage to find something to do with themselves. God looks after them. Let's go." "Where are you taking me?" asked Candide. "Where are we going? What will we do without Cunegonde?" "By St. James of Compostela," said Cacambo, "you were going to fight against the Jesuits. Let's go and fight for them. I know the roads. I'll take you to their kingdom, and they'll be glad to have a captain who knows the Bulgar drills. You'll make a tremendous fortune. If a man doesn't get what he wants in one world, he can find it in another. It's always a great pleasure to see and do new things." "So you've been in Paraguay before?" asked Candide. "I certainly have," said Cacambo. "I was once a servant in the College of the Assumption, and I know the Fathers' government as well as I know the streets of Cadiz. Their government is a wonderful thing. The kingdom is already more than 750 miles across, and it's divided into 30 provinces. The Fathers have everything, the people nothing. It's a masterpiece of reason and justice. I don't know if anyone as divine as the Fathers over here. I don't know of anyone as divine as the Fathers. Over here they wage war against the King of Spain and the King of Portugal, and in Europe they're the confessors of those same kings. Here they kill Spaniards. In Madrid they send them to heaven. I find the whole thing delightful. Come with me. You're going to be the happiest man in the world. How glad the Fathers will be when they learn that a captain who knows the Bulgar drills has come to them." As soon as they reached the first border post, Cacambo told the guard that a captain wished to speak to the commandant. Word was sent to headquarters. A Paraguayan officer hurried to the feet of the commandant to tell him the news. Candide and Cacambo were first of all disarmed, and their Andalusian horses were taken from them. The two strangers were brought in between two ranks of soldiers, at the end of which was the commandant, with a three-cornered hat on his head, his robe tucked up, a sword at his side, and a pike in his hand. He made a sign, and the two newcomers were instantly surrounded by 24 soldiers. A sergeant told them they would have to wait, that the commandant could not speak to them, and that the Reverend Father Provincial did not allow any Spaniard to open his mouth in his presence or remain in the country for more than 3 hours. "Where is the Reverend Father Provincial?" asked Cacambo. "He's gone to the parade ground after saying his mass," replied the sergeant, "and you won't be able to kiss his spurs for another 3 hours." "But," said Cacambo, "my captain and I are starving, and he's not a Spaniard, he's a German. Couldn't we have something to eat while we're waiting for his reverence?" The sergeant went straight to the commandant and reported this conversation to him. "God be praised," said the commandant. "Since he's a German, I can talk to him. Have him brought to my arbor." Candide was immediately shown into a shady retreat adorned with a pretty colonnade of green and gold marble, and trellis-work cages enclosing parrots, colibris, hummingbirds, guinea fowl, and all sorts of other rare birds. An excellent meal had been served in golden vessels, and while the Paraguayans were eating corn from wooden bowls in the blazing sunlight of the open fields, his reverence the commandant entered his arbor. He was a handsome young man with a round face, a fair complexion, red cheeks, arched eyebrows, bright eyes, pink ears, and crimson lips. He had an air of pride, but it was not the pride of a Spaniard or a Jesuit. Candide and Cacambo were given back their weapons and their Andalusian horses, which had been taken away from them. Cacambo fed them their oats near the arbor, and kept an eye on them for fear of a surprise. After Candide had kissed the hem of the commandant's robe, they sat down to table. "So you're German," said the Jesuit in that language. "Yes, Reverend Father," said Candide. As they spoke these words, they looked at each other in amazement and with uncontrollable emotion. "And what part of Germany are you from?" asked the Jesuit. "From the dirty province of Westphalia," said Candide. "I was born in the castle of Thundertentronckh." "Oh, heaven!" exclaimed the commandant. "Is it possible?" "What a miracle!" exclaimed Candide. "Is it really you?" said the commandant. "It can't be possible," said Candide. They both fell back in astonishment. Then they embraced each other and shed torrents of tears. "What, is it really you, Reverend Father? You, the brother of my fair Cunegonde? You who were killed by the Bulgars? You, the son of my lord the Baron? You, a Jesuit in Paraguay? This world is a strange place, there's no denying it. Oh, Pangloss, Pangloss, how happy you'd be if you hadn't been hanged." The commandant dismissed the negro slaves and Paraguayans who were serving wine to them in rock crystal goblets. He gave 1,000 thanks to God and Saint Ignatius, and clasped Candide in his arms while tears flowed down their cheeks. "You'd be still more amazed, more deeply moved, and more excited," said Candide, "when I tell you—" "You'll be still more amazed, more deeply moved, and more excited," said Candide, "when I tell you that your sister, Lady Cunegonde, whom you thought to have been disemboweled, is in the best of health." "Where is she?" "Not far from here, in Buenos Aires, with the governor. I'd come to make war on you." Each word they spoke during their long conversation brought some new wonder to light. Their whole souls flew from their tongues, listened attentively in their ears, sparkled in their eyes. Since they were Germans, they sat at table for a long time, awaiting the Reverend Father Provincial, and the Commandant spoke to his dear Candide as follows. Chapter 15. How Candide killed the brother of his beloved Cunegonde. "All my life I'll remember the horrible day when I saw my parents killed and my sister raped. When the Bulgars had gone, my adorable sister couldn't be found. My parents and I were put in a cart, along with the bodies of 2 maidservants and 3 little boys who'd been murdered, and taken away to be buried in a Jesuit chapel 5 miles from our ancestral castle. A Jesuit sprinkled holy water on us. It was terribly salty, and a few drops of it got into my eyes. The Jesuit saw my eyelids flutter. He put his hand over my heart and felt it beating. I was given the care I needed, and 3 months later I was as good as new. As you know, my dear Candide, I was very handsome. I became even handsomer, so the Reverend Father Kraus, the abbot of the house, took a great liking to me, and some time later I was sent to Rome. The Father General needed a group of young German Jesuit recruits. The rulers of Paraguay take as few Spanish Jesuits as they can. They prefer foreigners because they feel they can control them better. The Reverend Father General decided I was fit to go and work in this vineyard. I left with a Pole and a Tyrolean. When I arrived, I was given the honor of being made a subdeacon and a lieutenant. Today I'm a colonel and a priest. We'll give a hot reception to the King of Spain's troops. I guarantee you they'll be excommunicated and beaten. Providence has sent you here to help us. But is it true that my dear sister Cunegonde is near here with the governor of Buenos Aires?" Candide swore to him that nothing could be truer. Their tears began to flow again. The Baron never tried embracing Candide, and he called him his brother and savior. The Baron never tired of embracing Candide, and he called him his brother and savior. "Ah, my dear Candide," he said, "perhaps we can enter the city together as victors and rescue my sister Cunegonde." "I hope so," said Candide, "because I intend to marry her, and I still do." "You insolent wretch," answered the Baron, "how impudent of you even to think of marrying my sister, who has 72 generations of nobility behind her. You ought to be ashamed of yourself for daring to mention such an audacious scheme to me." Candide, petrified on hearing this, replied to him, "Reverend Father, all the generations of nobility in the world would make no difference. I rescued your sister from the arms of a Jew and an Inquisitor. She's under great obligation to me, and she wants to marry me." Dr. Pangloss always told me that all men are equal, and I will certainly marry her. We'll see about that, you scoundrel, said the Jesuit baron, Thunder Ten Tronckh, and at the same time he struck him across the face with the flat of his sword. Candide instantly drew his own sword and plunged it to the hilt in the Jesuit baron's belly. But when he drew it out, he began to weep. Dear God, he said, I've killed my former master, my friend, my brother-in-law. I'm the kindest man in the world, yet I've already killed 3 men. 2 of them were priests. Cacambo, who had been standing watch at the entrance of the arbor, came running in. There's nothing left for us to do except sell our lives dearly. His master said to him, They'll surely come into the arbor. We must die sword in hand. Cacambo, having been in tight spots before, did not lose his head. He took the baron's Jesuit robe, put it on Candide, gave him the dead man's hat, and made him mount his horse. All this was done in the twinkling of an eye. Now let's gallop away, sir, he said. Everyone will take you for a Jesuit carrying orders, and we'll cross the border before they can come after us. With these words he dashed forward, shouting in Spanish, make way for the Reverend Father Colonel."